Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. So today we're going to look at something that, honestly, might sound a little intimidating at first. Logic. But wait, before you tune out, I want you to totally change how you think about that word. We're not going to treat logic as a set of rigid, abstract rules locked away in some dusty textbook. Instead, think of today's session as building a fundamental toolkit. This is the exact same toolkit professional philosophers use to test beliefs, clarify concepts, and accurately describe reality. And you know what? Whether you realize it or not, you use these tools every single day to navigate the world and make your arguments. Today, we're just going to sharpen them up a bit.
Here is our agenda for today, kind of like our class syllabus. First, we'll look at the power of conditionals. Then we'll break down the anatomy of a statement. After that, we'll tackle the tricky necessary versus sufficient conditions, learn the art of counterexamples, and finally, wrap up with universal affirmative statements. We're going to build these skills step by step.
Section 1. The power of conditionals.
Okay, let's dive into this. Our first and probably most important tool is the conditional statement. Now, you might be expecting some dense, heavy, philosophical jargon right out of the gate, but logic is actually rooted in everyday life. Take this classic, super relatable phrase: if you eat your meat, then you can have some pudding. You've probably heard or even said a variation of this at the dinner table, right? It's a simple, everyday scenario, but functionally, it's a perfect textbook example of a foundational logical structure. That dinner table rule is what philosophers call a conditional. A conditional is literally just a logical statement that expresses the relationship between two propositions. Most commonly, you're going to see it set up as an if-then statement. And guys, conditionals are the absolute bedrock of logical arguments. Why? Because we use them to accurately describe how the world works or to construct a really rigorous theory. When philosophers try to nail down complex, messy concepts like what it means to be innocent or what it means to be good, they rely heavily on conditionals to set the clear boundaries of those ideas.
Section 2. Anatomy of a statement.
Just like a biologist dissects a specimen to see how the organs function together, we need to break down the internal structure of these statements to see how the logic actually operates under the hood. Consider two statements. First, you must complete 120 credit hours to earn a bachelor's degree. Now, the second, if you expect to graduate, then you must complete 120 credit hours. And this brilliantly illustrates a key rule of logic. Basically, any conditional can be rephrased into an if-then format without losing its core logical meaning. Both of these sentences convey the exact same requirement, but putting it into that formal if-then structure makes it so much easier for us to analyze. So whenever we have an if-then statement, it always has two distinct components. The first part is called the antecedent. The antecedent is simply whatever follows the word if. You can kind of think of it as the foundation or the starting point of our logical equation. It's the core condition that's being set up. Actually, if you ever struggle to remember which part is which, just look at the word itself. The prefix ante literally means before. Think of a word like antebellum, which refers to the period before the American Civil War. So the antecedent is just the part of the conditional that occurs logically before the result. Which brings us to the second part, the consequent. The consequent is whatever follows the word then. It is the necessary result that follows the antecedent. If the antecedent turns out to be true, the consequent is the outcome. Boom! So, going back to our graduation example, expecting to graduate was our antecedent, and completing the 120 credit hours was the consequent, the direct result of that expectation. This two-part anatomy is the basic blueprint for all conditional logic.
Section 3. Necessary versus sufficient conditions.
I'm going to be completely honest with you. This next concept is often the trickiest part for a lot of people. But don't worry, we're going to use the tools we just built to guide us through it step by step. I want you to chew on this question. When we say if X, then Y, does that logical relationship go both ways? Is it perfectly symmetrical? Like, if X guarantees Y, does Y automatically guarantee X? Thinking about this symmetry, or actually the lack of it, is the absolute secret to unlocking necessary and sufficient conditions. Let's make this concrete with an example. If a creature is a dog, then it is a mammal. In this case, X is being a dog. Being a dog is a sufficient condition for being a mammal. If you know a creature is a dog, that information alone is entirely sufficient to guarantee it's a mammal. But look at Y, being a mammal. Being a mammal is a necessary condition for being a dog. You literally cannot be a dog without being a mammal. However, and this is absolutely key here, the relationship is asymmetrical. Being a mammal does not guarantee you are a dog, right? There are plenty of other mammals out there, cats, whales, humans. So X is sufficient for Y, but Y is only necessary for X. Let's reinforce this with one more example. If you are a bachelor, then you are unmarried. Knowing someone, let's call him Eric, is a bachelor is a totally sufficient condition to know he is unmarried. The truth of the first part guarantees the truth of the second. But the reverse isn't true. Being unmarried is absolutely necessary to be a bachelor, but it's not exclusive to bachelors. An unmarried woman is also unmarried, but she is definitely not a bachelor. So the crucial point to remember is this. The antecedent, the if part, Rx, is the sufficient condition. It automatically implies Y. The consequent, the then part, Y, is the necessary condition. X cannot possibly be true without Y being true. Keeping this asymmetry clear in your head will massively level up the clarity of your own thinking and your ability to craft bulletproof arguments.
Section 4. The art of counterexamples. So, what happens when someone makes a logical statement that you think is flawed? How do we test these rigid logical rules in the real world? Imagine this scenario. A mother looks at her teenager and says, "If you spend all day in the sun, you'll get sunburned." Let's map out mom's logic. She's setting up a conditional. She is claiming that getting sunburned, the consequent, is a necessary condition of spending all day in the sun, the antecedent. According to her statement, it is a completely unavoidable result. Now, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of that teenager who desperately wants to go to the beach. You need to break mom's logic. Is her conditional rule actually true? Does the claimed necessary condition always occur alongside the sufficient one? How do you win this argument? Simple. You introduce a variable she completely missed. You point out that regular application of a really good sunblock, say SPF 30 or above, will let you spend all day in the sun and avoid the sunburn entirely. By doing this, you have successfully proven that getting sunburned is not a necessary condition for being in the sun all day. You've completely broken the logical necessity of her statement. What you just did right there was provide a counterexample. A counterexample is simply an opposing statement that proves a conditional wrong by showing a specific case where the necessary condition just does not occur. But look, creating counterexamples isn't just a hack for winning arguments with your parents. It is a fundamental critical thinking habit. Philosophy teaches us to constantly question the world around us, right? Generating creative counterexamples is literally the best method we have for rigorously testing the truth of propositions and, honestly, for testing and revising our own deeply held beliefs.
Section 5. Universal affirmative statements.
Okay, we've reached our final building block. Let's move to and see how this builds on everything we've talked about. We're going to take what we know about conditionals and expand it to cover massive categorical claims. Aristotle actually included universal affirmative statements in his system of logic, believing they were among the few truly meaningful logical statements. But look closely. If that animal is a dog, then it is a mammal. That's our familiar conditional. Now look at the universal. All dogs are mammals. Or, abstractly, all A are B. Guess what? They are exactly the same logic. Universal affirmative statements are really just alternative expressions of conditionals. They take two groups of things and claim that absolutely all members of the first group are also members of the second group. Because they're logically equivalent, any universal statement can be translated back into an if-then conditional to help you clearly identify the necessary and sufficient conditions. Let's put this to the absolute ultimate test. Here is a very strong, sweeping, universal claim that you might hear in a philosophy or ethics class. All living things deserve moral consideration. Because it uses the word all, it's an affirmative universal statement. It's claiming that the entire group of living things fits perfectly inside the group of things deserving moral consideration. But remember, our toolkit. To disprove a massive universal claim like that, you don't need a mountain of evidence. Because the claim is so intensely strong, asserting that all living things deserve this consideration, you only need to find just one single counterexample to bring the whole shebang down. A philosopher might argue, well, what about a deadly parasite? Does the protozoa that causes malaria deserve moral consideration? If you believe it doesn't, then boom, you have just proven that not all living things deserve moral consideration. You've successfully dismantled a universal statement using a single, precise counterexample. And you know, that is the true power of logic. It's not just some abstract academic theory, it is a highly practical toolkit for navigating truth and fiction in our daily lives. So I'm going to leave you with a challenge as we wrap up this explainer. Look at the universal statements you use in your own life. Look at the if-then conditionals you just implicitly accept as facts. Can you construct a counterexample to test your most deeply held beliefs? Because here's the thing, if your beliefs survive the test, they are stronger for it. And if they don't, well then you've just learned something genuinely new.